Hello, History 10 students, and welcome to our final, live session of the year. Well, not the year, the quarter. Class is coming to a close this Friday, November 5th. And today we're at the end of the course essentially, and most people have already been submitting assignments in units 6 and 7. I hope to receive some assignments from some people who haven't handed things in a while. So I'll do a little bit of course housekeeping here right at the beginning, as I normally do. Just some questions that have been asked, some things I've noticed when assessing the assignments. So first thing, I did have a student let me know today that in assignment, I think it was 6.2 and 6.3, part of the Industrial Revolution assignments. For 6.2 and 6.3, the option to resubmit an assignment after you've made some refinements based on the feedback I've given you, it was accidentally turned off for assignments 6.2 and 6.3. So if you had intended on fixing and resubmitting an assignment for 6.2 or 6.3, you wouldn't have been able to do it until this morning. So if it did give you some trouble the first time you tried to do it, if you go back now, it should allow you to resubmit an assignment, which I always encourage. I think it's always a good thing for students to be able to incorporate feedback into their assignments and then demonstrate further learning or further elaboration, and just another opportunity for you to communicate and demonstrate your learning in the course. So that doesn't just go for assignment 6. I've tried to make that an important point, the live sessions and assignment descriptions and whatnot, is that it is important that A, you read them carefully the first time, and B, you closely connect your answers to the questions. Sometimes it's a little, it's easy to get bogged down in details or go off on a bit of a tangent and kind of stray away from what the question is really asking. And that's not something that's unique to grade 10 students or history students. That happens for all students and adults. So sometimes the feedback you'll get from me will just be an attempt to kind of recenter you on the main point or the main thing we're trying to learn about that particular piece of content, or what I'm hoping to get from you with regard to a response or a demonstration of your learning in those questions for the assignment. So hopefully the feedback that I've been giving you is helpful in helping you push your learning and push the way that you demonstrate and communicate your understanding and your learning in this class. And I have noticed for students that are in the habit of taking that feedback and then resubmitting assignments, that they're typically very well done. So I mean, that's always reassuring to see as a teacher, that students are not just satisfied for sort of ripping an assignment, getting it done as quickly as possible, handing it in, and kind of forgetting about it. It's really nice to see that a substantial group of students were willing to look at the feedback and to incorporate the parts that they felt were relevant, and to make a strong effort to improve the quality of the assignment. And that reaffirms for me that A, it's worthwhile, and B, that students are willing to take that upon themselves to learn and continue to learn and continue to push themselves to demonstrate their learning. So very, very happy with that. And I encourage you to continue to do that, even right up to the end of the course here. There are some students that are already finished all the assignments in the course, and that's great. It's wonderful. Hopefully they can spend that remaining time either finishing another class that they've got this quarter, or catching up on something else that they need to do. But if you do have the time and you're finished the class, if you're not happy with one of your assignment marks, it may be something that you want to look at. You may want to go back and have another look at the feedback and see if you can add a few things here or there and improve your mark. Everything helps. And some people have been in a habit of just really, really doing a good job on things the first time and submitting work that really does an excellent job of demonstrating their learning and is connected very closely to the questions that I've asked and the content and the learning resources, and also to their external research. So, oftentimes resubmitting an assignment or refining assignment isn't necessary because it was just done so well the first time. And Yeah, so I feel like the people who have been working hard in this class, the people who have been spending an appropriate amount of time on the learning materials and watching the live session recordings or attending the live sessions, have generally done very well in this class, and I think that's a testament to you being able and responsible enough to manage your time and schedule very effectively in an environment where there maybe isn't a whole lot of oversight, certainly not from teachers. That you have to make your own time for the class. You have to make sure that the place that you do your learning area, the office or the kitchen table or your room or whatever it is conducive to you getting things done. And it's a lot to ask of somebody who's younger, to really fully take responsibility for managing their time and managing their course load effectively. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's an easy thing to think that you can do, but to actually make sure that you're planning your time effectively and spending an appropriate amount of time without a teacher being there to kind of look over your shoulder. That's a major growth milestone. And those of you who have been doing it and doing it well during the COVID pandemic or any online learning that was by choice, congratulations. And I think it's a really important life skill, and hopefully it's something that you use not just in this class, but you just incorporate in your everyday life. Okay, so sort of more housekeeping stuff. Assignment 6.2 and 6.3, they are definitely open for resubmission, so should you so choose. Somebody asked me about resubmitting 6.1. I can't do that because it was a quiz, and also because the answers were given to you as feedback when you got your quiz, when you looked at your mark for your quiz. All of the answers were already in there, so that wouldn't serve much of a purpose to offer a resubmission on that one, which takes us right into Unit 7. As I've said, there's several people who have already finished all the assignments for Unit 7, and that's great. Thank you, and well done. Some people haven't submitted assignments from Unit 7 or some other units, and you know what? I understand. It's a busy time. It's been a very difficult first quarter. Everybody's still getting adjusted, I think. But I'm certainly happy to take in any assignments that you can get to me in the next couple of days. We can do whatever we can to try to boost your mark a little bit and give you full credit for what you've earned. The course set, the Unit 7 content is relatively minimal. It's a much smaller unit than some of the others. Your final grade, the weighting is not equally distributed amongst the concepts that we've gone through in this class. Some of the outcome areas and some of the units are certainly more in depth than others, and as such, those receive sort of a larger portion of the weighting for your final grade. So when you're looking at your marks, and you can't just take an average of every assignment and take that as your final mark. It's not that simple. There's certain units that are weighted more heavily than others. For instance, units 1, 2, and 5 are certainly had more in-depth content, and the assignments, they tended to be a little bit longer. There tended to be questions and essays and whatnot that you had to demonstrate significantly more research and incorporation of the concepts from class materials and formal writing and things like that. So those were the assignments that took you longer, which means you should get, that they should bear a larger portion of your final grade. I think we all realize that a project that would take you 5 hours to complete should probably be worth more than a quiz that took you 3 minutes to study for and complete. And I think that's only logical. So if you have any questions about which are the assignments that are weighted the heaviest in the course, you can either just look at the denominator. So what's the assignment out of? The larger assignments tended to be worth more. So if an assignment was out of 50, it's certainly going to impact your final grade a lot more than an assignment that was out of 5 or 6 or 8. So just something to keep in mind. For those of you who have been struggling in the class, or you haven't handed in a lot of work or enough work to earn a credit at this point, I did send out an email or two in the last week, just giving you a list of assignments that I feel are sort of the most indicative of your ability to demonstrate your learning to me. So the most important assignments in the class. And everybody who was under 50% got that email. I also copied it to parents and guardians, and it included that list of assignments just to kind of recenter you and let you know that these are the things that you should focus on. These are the assignments that are going to give you the best opportunity to raise your mark to 50% or higher so that you can earn a credit in the class. I sent out an additional email today for another email for students whose current mark is under 50%, letting them know that we do have an opportunity that's called outcome completion, which you may have heard of before, but given that you're grade 10 students, you probably wouldn't have seen it in your academic career to date because you haven't been taking classes that are official credit classes. Grade 9 classes, you're not granted credits for. That starts at grade 10. And the way the outcome completion works, it's described in the email. Again, that email went to the students as well as to parents and guardians. And the way it works is that if your grade is between 30% and 49%, so you're still failing, but you're between 30 and 49, the teacher can, and it is a teacher choice, the teacher can give a student an opportunity for a 2-week extension into quarter 2 so that you can spend a little bit more time demonstrating your learning in a few different areas that I feel are important for you to have earned that credit. So it is at teacher's discretion. We can't offer it to anybody who has less than a 30% at the end of the course, their final grade. And if I think that you've been doing your best to hand things in and that your grade is in that range, you may have the opportunity to take a couple extra weeks to finish things up. Now, there's a couple things to note about outcome completion, and one of those is that you can't get a grade higher than 50%. So it doesn't matter how much you hand in after the course is over. The best mark you can get if you were doing outcome completion is 50%. So it's basically a pass and a credit. You can't increase your mark to 80% or anything like that. Secondly, if your mark is above 50% at the end of the course, you don't need to worry about outcome completion at all. You've already earned the credit, and whatever grade you had on the last day will be your final grade. The last day being, when I've marked all the assignments that were handed in by Friday at about noon. If you can, please do get those assignments in to me either end of day tomorrow or in the morning on Friday. I do have to assess them all and make sure that I calculate your final grade correctly and then put that on your report card and make comments for students. There's quite a bit to do for both students and teachers at the end of the quarter. So the sooner you can get assignments to me, the more likely I will be able to mark past assignments. I need to mark things that are handed in on time by students that have been more or less keeping up with course content. But certainly I will do my best to get everything marked that you submit prior to Friday at noon, and I will get it marked. You just might not get the same sort of feedback that you would get if you had handed it in earlier in the course around the due date. So that's my promise to you. I'll be working hard this weekend to try to make sure everything is marked and submitted and comments are written for the report cards. I'm actually not 100% sure if you're going to receive a sort of a more official report card in the mail. As you found out in this class and probably all your other classes, we're trying to move students and parents to a system called edsby. Now, the parent section of edsby, or the parent software for edsby, isn't currently unlocked. We're still ironing out a few bugs. However, the student version of edsby is available, and if you did not get my email, if you did not read the announcement, go to the announcements page, and there's a big announcement here, regarding the rollout of edsby for students and parents. Every student has automatically an edsby account. All parents will have access, well, your parents or guardians will have access to your edsby account as well. And what it is, it's an attempt to be a bit more transparent with regard to our communication. So edsby moving forward is going to be a place where you can stay on top of your classes, your assignments, your schedules, and other communications from the school. So what that might look like is there's a grade book in there that you're going to see your grades for units or assignments or your final grade, any of the above. There's an attendance tracker so that you can always find out your attendance for classes. You can look at your schedule. There's a calendar to show you upcoming events. You can get messages from your teacher. You can send messages to your teacher. I've already received a couple actually. And all sorts of other options. So edsby is going to kind of be the one-stop shop for everything educational for Saskatoon Public Schools. And we're really hoping that students are going to be using it consistently, as well as parents and guardians. The fact that you will now have basically 24/7 access to all of your grades and assignments and all the information related to you as a student, your marks in other classes, transcripts, things like that. The fact that you're going to have 24/7 access to it, as well as your parents and guardians, means that there's probably going to be less external communication with parents and guardians and students at this point. Instead of trying to email, oftentimes the emails that are given to us during registration have errors in it, spelling errors, incorrect phone numbers, things like that. So it can sometimes be a little spotty with regard to messages from school and from teachers getting to students and parents. We're hoping that edsby is going to help that process along, because we can all just communicate through the edsby portal. edsby is, it's been around for a long time. It's not something that Saskatoon Public Schools developed themselves. We just, we purchased a license from them and built a system using some technology that was already there. And so it's relatively stable. It's being supported in, in all, the major school divisions in Saskatchewan and Canada and in the US and whatnot. So it's a very, very big product. And it may go down from time to time, but it's not a small program developed by somebody locally. It's something that's supported by a lot of people working very hard in a lot of different places. So it should be pretty stable. I tried the phone app out. It seems to be pretty good. So hopefully, if that's the way you prefer to do your web surfing and stay in touch with the world, if you've got an iPhone or an Android, there's the edsby app is free, and you can log in using your student information, and it should work, more or less just as well as the website. There's certain things you can't do on the app that you can do on the website, but for the most part, you can access, your grades and information and message teachers and get messages from teachers and whatnot with the app. So, eventually your parents will have access to the free app as well, but you can already download it and install it and give it a try. And if you're not really a phone person, or you don't want to have edsby on your phone, you can just access it through the edsby website, and all of that stuff is listed in this announcement. So if you haven't already done so, please go look at that, and please go log into it at least once, or download the app and install it. We are kind of trying to keep track of who's accessed it already, just because we know it's going to be so important moving forward. We want to make sure that every student has the opportunity to log in and look around and know that this is where the majority of your information, including report card marks, final marks, credits, transcripts, and report card comments, those are probably all going to be done through edsby now, as opposed to getting the old-fashioned paper report card that you picked up at your homeroom. All right, so that being said about edsby, I just want to note that as online learning students, your experience is probably going to be a little different with edsby. You will have an edsby account. Your teachers will be putting marks and other communications into edsby, but we are still going to be using Blackboard as our primary learning system. So not just for quarter one, but quarter two, quarter three, quarter four, whatever classes you have remaining that are online, you are still going to be using Blackboard. Blackboard's still going to be where you're getting all your learning materials. It's still going to be where you're getting all your assignments. It's still going to be where you're handing all your assignments in. It's still going to be the place that we do these live sessions. So you are still going to be using Blackboard the vast majority of your time. With regard to marks, your teachers will be putting marks in edsby. But the problem right now is that we mark all of the assignments and give feedback through the Blackboard system, which you know because it's been happening all quarter one. There is no automatic way for the marks that we put into Blackboard to automatically go into edsby. So your mark, whenever a teacher marks something or gives you feedback on something in Blackboard, your mark is automatically updated, or at least the assignment mark is automatically updated in Blackboard right away. So whenever you go to your My Grades area, if you handed in an assignment and it got marked, you will see that mark right away in Blackboard. But it doesn't automatically go over to edsby. So what your online teachers have to do is roughly once a week, we're just going to go into edsby and we're going to re-enter all the marks in that are already in Blackboard. So there will be marks in edsby, but they might not be, you know, accurate up till that day or that couple of days. If you want to know the most accurate mark for any assignment, what you see on Blackboard is going to be the most recent and the most up to date. That being said, the edsby marks should be pretty close because we're going to be updating them every week or so. For History 10, I did a whole bunch of marking the last 2 or 3 days, and you probably saw that on Blackboard. Everything up until, I believe, assignment 7.2 has been graded, and you've been given feedback, and I also put those marks up on edsby as well. So your mark on edsby right now is probably very close to what you would see in Blackboard. All right, so I think that kind of takes care of the edsby stuff. Are there any questions about that? Anybody who's here live, have you had a chance to log in and kind of play around a little bit with edsby yet? Hey, George. Yeah, I absolutely see you there. I hear your point, and you're right. It's not particularly convenient for online teaching right now. The system is not rudimentary. Keep in mind that online learning probably only constitutes 5 to 10% of the classes that are offered. So edsby is going to be the primary place where students get information, hand in assignments. It's going to be their version of Blackboard for about 90% of the students in the province. We're kind of a special case because we were around before edsby, and we needed a learning management system that could do all the things that Blackboard can do. So we've been using Blackboard for a long time. And because edsby came in the middle of the year, it's not going to make sense for us to change over at this point. It may happen next year, I don't know. But edsby right now is directed at the students who are doing a lot of in-class learning. So that's the majority of students. We obviously have larger numbers of online students during the COVID pandemic. In fact, our numbers of students for last year for online learning was actually bigger than the biggest high school in Saskatoon. So because of COVID, online learning got a real boost in numbers, but in general, you're still going to see 90% of the students of Saskatchewan going to physical classrooms. And will that continue in the future? I mean, we don't know, right? There's vaccines. It depends where COVID takes us, right? So every parent and every student's got the right to decide whether they want to do in-class learning or online learning, and that's not going to change. But the numbers of students who are doing online learning versus the number of students who are going to be in physical classrooms, that can change depending on the circumstances and you know how things are going with the pandemic and whatnot. So my limited experience with edsby shows that it is very good. Students were probably aware of Maplewood, which was the system that was before it, but I strongly suspect that most students rarely went into Maplewood. You know, maybe a couple times a year to register for your classes, or maybe check on your marks, or to have a look at your transcript or something like that. But I don't think students regularly used Maplewood, and I know parents didn't as well. Whereas we're really hoping that edsby is just kind of one of those things that you're going to see every day. So you know you're gonna actually use it. Anyway, I hope you look into it, and I hope you find that it's helpful. Some students are obviously not going to be as happy that this thing exists now, because your parents and guardians are always going to have access to your assignments, your due dates, your schedule, your attendance, and your marks. And some students may not be 100% pleased about that, but certainly your parents and guardians do have the right to know what is going on at school. So it will open up those communication lines a bit more at home, I suspect. And as teachers, we're really hoping that there aren't a whole lot of surprises. You know, I'm a parent myself, and it would be very difficult to be surprised by the fact that my son or daughter wasn't doing well at school. Parents, you know, generally want to be communicated with and want to know how their student is doing, and hopefully edsby will help with that. So anyway, thanks for your comments. Amelia said you hadn't tried it out yet. Give it a shot. Just go to the website and log in and tour around a little bit. It'll take you 5 minutes and just kind of familiarize yourself with it, because it's probably going to be around. But if you and future students, or you and students who are watching this later, are continuing to take online classes, you're going to still use Blackboard for 90% of what we do. Again, we'll see what happens next year. All right, so I don't know that there's a whole lot of content, to be honest with you, that that we have remaining. Most people are into Unit 7. A lot of people have handed in and gotten back 7.1, 7.2. Several people, again, have done assignment 7.3 as well and are finished the course. So I just wanted to take a look at these assignments from Unit 7 and just give you some feedback on things that I have seen so far. As you all know, I took this course over from another teacher, and I've been trying to, sort of adapt things as we go along, add rubrics, clarify questions, just change things so that there may be a little bit more representative of the way the way I express myself as a teacher, and the way that I assess things, and the way I give you feedback. So that's neither good or bad. I'm just saying it's sort of the way I do things. And as I went through the assignment 7 and started assessing it, I thought that some of the questions were maybe not as clear as I wanted them to be. So I went back and I did change a few things around, and I added significantly to the rubric so that it's clear what you're being assessed on. And I figured I'd just take this opportunity just to kind of highlight a couple of things that I noted when I was going through your assignments, the ones that were handed in, and things that kind of popped out for me. First off, I think maybe some of these helpers actually confused the issue a little bit more, and I will continue to refine those. But in general, I want you to focus on the question, and I want to make sure that your answers are targeted on what's being expressed in the question. The helpers, little hints underneath, they're just kind of giving you some extra ideas, some different directions you can maybe take the question. But I still would like the responses, quite focused on what the question is actually asking. And number 2 seemed to be the one that got away from some students a bit. I mean, don't get me wrong, the vast majority of assignments I got were extremely well done. But I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on the focus here. So question 1, identify ways in which the pandemic has highlighted and contributed to inequalities in our society. I think that one's relatively clear. There's always going to be inequalities and equity in society. There's always going to be marginalized groups. Now that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. And we are, I think, as citizens, we're doing the best we can every generation to try to further reduce those inequalities, and marginalization and subjugation of groups. I like to think that we're trying to do that. Not everybody, not every corporation, not every government feels the same way. We're trying to address those inequalities, but they exist. And the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, has further highlighted some of those inequalities. So, some things that were maybe unequal, or, people that were marginalized, the situations that they were in prior to COVID, they're still in those situations. In fact, oftentimes they've gotten worse, and all of the media attention on COVID has maybe brought to light some of those inequalities and how they appear to be getting worse. So that question looked like it was answered quite clearly by most students, but the focus there was how has the COVID pandemic highlighted some of those inequalities for people who are marginalized in society. And some people have brought up, access to healthcare, the ability to perhaps work in public versus working at home, the flexibility that people in certain socioeconomic situations have. So, maybe these inequalities did always exist, but pandemics kind of made them worse. For instance, let's just consider somebody who has had opportunities and taken advantage of them in life, and has a reasonably high paying job with good benefits and a reasonably stable job. Well, the pandemic hits, that person might be better able to weather the storm, so to speak. Perhaps they've got They've got, corporate permission to work from home, so it's more flexible. They don't have to go out. Maybe they've got support built into their benefit plans at work, where if they need some time for sick leave or something like that, it's there and they don't lose their job. And then you can look at the other side of the spectrum. Perhaps we've got somebody who's from a more marginalized area of society. Maybe they didn't have access to a reasonably secure, high-paying job before the pandemic. Now the pandemic hits and businesses are struggling. If that person works, if that person works at a location where they're a frontline worker and they work with people or around people all day, those businesses may have been affected. And what did that lead to? That might have led to people being laid off, loss of jobs, or it might lead to a situation where they are, because they're in the public, they're more likely to get sick because they are in direct contact with so many more people. So there's an area where there was an inequality prior to COVID, whether it was the income or the support from work or just the access to have a job, that the pandemic may have made worse or may have made the inequality greater than it was before, as the person with the, let's call it, secure and stable and supported job is probably still okay and more or less able to work the way they did before, just maybe in a different location. Whereas someone on the other end of the spectrum had a less secure job than they had before. They may have been laid off. They may have been asked to work more hours in a more dangerous, sort of social setting. And so they're much worse off than they would have been before the pandemic. So that's just an example of highlighting an inequality that actually was, more brought into light by the pandemic or was made more significant by the pandemic. So that's what I mean for question one. For question two, again, this is the one that students tended to get a little bit more off track on. And I think that's partly because of the word and term data-centric. And it's partly because of, a couple of the helpers may have actually done a bit more distraction than focusing. So I just want to address that. The main question is, how can data-centric approaches shape social contracts, especially for employees moving forward? So we're hoping sort of more for let's focus on work and the world of work and the employees at work and the way that, businesses and workplaces, because you spend a lot of your time at work. But from the time that you're, maybe getting your first job in your teens to when you retire, you spend at least a third of your day at work, which means you spend at least a third of your life at work, which means the workplace is a very, very important social environment. And as companies, employers, people who have, influence in the business world, it's to everybody's advantage to make people comfortable and happy with their work situations, because happy people are better workers. Happy people make other people, more positive. It tends to be a positive spiral when people are treated well at work and are productive and feel like they're productive, just like it can become a negative spiral. If you are working in a place that you don't like, if people around you are miserable, it tends to make, more people miserable, and then it just kind of feeds off itself and gets worse and worse. So the goal for workers and for managers and owners and anybody who's in the employment industry, whether it be public or government or private, the goal should be happy people, right? Happy employers, happy employees, people working together. It doesn't mean things are always going to go well. They certainly don't. But people tend to be more productive and live healthier lives when they are happy at work. Okay, so that's the focus. But the first part of the question is really important. It's how can data-centric approaches. Now, data-centric basically just means using numbers and using what you've learned from your employees in order to change the way that we look at work. So change the way that we perceive work, change the way that employers perceive employees, and change the way that businesses and government agencies and whatnot, how they operate moving forward, because those are types of social contracts. For example, in Canada, we tend to think of it's a social contract that most full-time workers work about 40 hours a week. That's essentially a social contract. Now, there's laws There's laws about how many hours you can work and what you're entitled to as far as benefits and sick pay and vacation pay and things like that. Of course, there's laws about that, but it's still a social contract. There is essentially a contract in society between workers and employees that if somebody's full-time, it's about 40 hours a week. We also generally feel that a work week is a Monday to a Friday, and that people have 2 days off, usually Saturday and Sunday, in order to, pursue personal interests, recover, basically do their own thing. Now, does that mean that everybody only works from Monday to Friday? Of course not. Lots and lots of people work on Saturdays and Sundays. There's lots of people who work, 3 or 4 days a week. There's lots of people that work 7 days a week. So there's always different situations, but in general, for the last, say 60 plus years, a work week is generally considered to be Monday to Friday and 8 hours a day for 40 hours a week. That's a social contract, right? And it's also part of the social contract that usually people left their home to go to work. Okay, you went and you worked at the manufacturing plant, or you went and you worked in the office, or you went and you worked at the grocery store. It was generally considered part of society that you just left your house to do your job. Now things are changing a little bit, and I would say, not just pandemic, but just the way that we have access to technology and the way that we can connect with people digitally now is changing how we perceive work, and it's also changing our ability to be productive from different locations. Now, the not going into the office or being able to work from home is just one small example of that. There's certainly many others. But the point of the question is, how can we use what we learn that's data? Okay, so we're talking about something that we can actually quantify. We've asked questions, we have surveys, there's interviews, we have records of, is this profitable or is this not profitable? How many hours do people work? How many hours do people want to work? How do we use data like that to change the social contract about work moving forward? And that's what I was hoping to get out of that question. And some people did give me that, but some people kind of went off in different directions. And I think that some of these quote helpers were probably not as helpful. The first one, there is some information found in the reference material, which I specifically pointed to. It starts on the page with a giant 2 on it, right? So that gives you a little bit of an idea about what a data-centric approach is. But there's also a couple of big words in there, probably new words for some of you. The first off, partisanship and polarization were both words that some students had, put on their answers for the assignment, but they didn't use those words properly, so I'm pretty sure they didn't know what they meant. And I understand that those are probably new words. They both kind of mean the same thing. Partisanship means that you belong to a certain way of thinking. Okay, so let's just use what we talked about a little bit already. We've talked about more liberal governments versus more conservative governments. Partisanship might mean that you're very strongly in line, your beliefs are very strongly in line with a liberal thinking, or with the way that liberal governments operate or think. That would be partisanship. And the other way as well, you may be very partisan to the conservative way of thinking. Now, it's not just those two things, that's just an example. And so it sort of means the same thing with polarization, because polarization essentially means you're pushing people to two extremes. And it gets its name from the North Pole and the South Pole on Earth. It's not scientifically true, but think about the North Pole is pretty much as far away from the South Pole as is possible on the Earth, right? Well, the Earth is not a perfect sphere, that's why it's not 100% true. But anyway, I digress. The point of the term polarization is you're either at the North Pole or you're at the South Pole. So polarization means you take people who are kind of in the middle ground and then you push them to the edges. And there's been a lot of talk and a lot of media coverage lately about how Facebook and other social media sites have been big. I hesitate to use the word great because I don't think it's a good thing, but have been large influencers in the polarization of people's beliefs in the last 10 years. For instance, if we stay with the political idea, there's extremely conservative governments and ideas in the world. There's extremely liberal governments and ideas in the world. And then there's a lot of people that mostly fall in the middle. Maybe you're slightly conservative or you're slightly liberal. You agree with some things in the conservative camp. You agree with other things in the liberal camp. So you're kind of in the middle between the two between the two extremes of pure conservatism and pure liberalism. You can say the same thing about economics. Maybe, you know, there's some ideas of capitalism that you think are great, and there's some ideas of socialism or communism that you think have merit too. But there's a lot of middle ground there between purely democratic or purely communist or purely capitalistic economies and purely socialist economies. There's a lot of middle ground, and you know, a big issue in society right now is that a lot of social media companies are optimizing their data and the way that they collect data from people and the way that they use data and the messages and ads that they show people, that they're using that data against the people. So they're using the data that they collect about you and your interests and the things that you post about, and then they're reinforcing those beliefs by showing you articles and advertisements and whatnot for things that they think that you're interested in, for things that push you a little bit more to the edges or to the extreme ends of whatever your thinking is, whether that be conservative, liberal, or what have you. So they're taking people that are kind of in the middle, you know, what we would consider centrist thinkers, and they're trying to continually reinforce extreme and more extreme messages to push people to the edges. And why did they do that? They do that because it's profitable. Because when people feel very strongly about something and they feel like they're at, you know, getting more extreme opinions about a subject or more, you know, information or organization or whatnot, as they get more interested and more involved in whatever it is we're talking about, whether it's economics or politics or any social issues, they tend to act on it more often, and acting on things leads to purchases and economy, you know. So ultimately, social media groups are doing it because there's profit in it, because that's how businesses operate. And I'm not pointing the finger just at Facebook, but it's clear that these things are happening in society, and it's also clear that people are moving from the middle ground more out to the extremes, and that leads to conflict. And sometimes that conflict or the debate is healthy because it gives you an opportunity to share your views and also to receive views and information from the other side and to make intelligent decisions. So a lot of time that we call the dialectic thinking or that discussion and the sharing and exchange of information is a very important social aspect, because I think that's how we learn. We don't learn from things we already know. We learn from things that we maybe don't know and don't understand. So it can be healthy, but it can also lead to conflict, which can be unhealthy if it's not dealt with in the right way. There's a show on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, which dives into this. Now, it is a documentary, which means there's inherently some bias in it, but I still thought it was very interesting and definitely worth watching. And it deals specifically with how social media is sort of changing and shaping social contracts. Normally, debates online won't change anyone's ideas, just creates conflict. George, you're right about that, and that's always been true in society. Some people don't want to have their minds changed, so it just becomes a yelling match, and there's not much you can do about that, right? It's a lot easier to be contentious and create conflict and angry conflict and unhelpful conflict on the internet because you're not actually standing in front of the person. So there's very few opportunities for you to get feedback from them, whether it be you know, like social cues or physical cues. You're less worried that there's going to be, you know, the chance that you get punched in the face for saying something offensive. That's why trolls hide behind their keyboards and tend to make inflammatory and a very extreme proclamations and posts and whatnot from behind their keyboard, because they're safe and they feel like they're anonymous. More often than not, that's unhelpful. That's generally not how effective dialogue is exchanged. That's typically not how, let's say, socially productive debate happens. There's a lot of opportunities for us to have very progressive, very social, very responsible exchanges of information on the internet, and it does happen, and it happens a lot, and it's great when it does. But it also opens up the opportunity for people to troll up, right? To say something in a way that's inflammatory or racist or offensive or inciting violence just because they can and they like to watch for reactions, and just because they're hiding behind a keyboard and essentially feel like they're free from consequence. So if you want to be a respectful and appropriately contributing member of society, do your best to put the troll away and not to engage in trolling on the website, and do your best to stick to your facts, state your opinion, back up your opinion with well-sourced research or experience. That's how we learn. And that's what we've been trying to do in this class the entire time, right? I've tried to get you to take a point of view, to give arguments, to give points, but also to back them up from the learning materials or your external research, in order to lend your points and arguments credence, because everybody's got an opinion, everybody's got a right to opinion. But to be fair, in a greater social sense, your opinion isn't really all that actionable unless you can back it up. Okay? If there's no evidence for the things that you're saying one way or another, you might just be speaking into the wind. Okay? That doesn't mean you're wrong. That just means that it's easier for you to convince people and to both learn and teach if you're able to use some sort of empirical evidence, logic, and reason to put your ideas across. And that's just the history of learning and idea exchange. Okay, so I think I went into a lot, but essentially the second question is, how can we use data? And let's try to focus maybe on the workforce and the work environment. How can we use that to change social contracts, or how are they changing? If you want to go into the sort of helper stuff, and this is where I think some of the confusion came. I said, thinking about, feudalistic structure where kings, queens have total rule and say over decisions in a society. I was thinking about this as less of a government thing and more of a company owner thing. So, in the past, corporate owners would have acted more like feudal kings and queens, right? This is their business. This is the way they do things. I'm going to tell employees what to do and how to do it. And if they don't do it, they can go away. If they do it, then I will continue to pay them and essentially protect them and move forward with them. So that was more the idea of the king and queen, or the feudalistic structure. It was more in a business sense, not necessarily sort of as the president or prime minister or government leader of a country. And that message might have gotten a little bit confused for some people. And so if it did, I understand. Then the other helper there is again back to employees. And if an employee can prove that they're more productive, is just an example, the working from home example. So that one kind of tried to bring it back a little bit to work. But if there was any confusion about that question, that's probably where it came from. Question 3 was generally answered pretty well as well. What are the focuses of long-term? I guess that should probably be foci, plural focus, foci. What are the focuses, or what are the foci of long-term health and healthcare? The focuses of long-term healthcare that are common today, but that we didn't really talk about 50 to 100 years ago. And some people again kind of went offline on this one. I was more wanting to direct this to healthcare. Things in that mental health is such a big issue right now. People are much more, the stigma of somebody who has mental health issues. Hopefully that stigma is getting a little bit less every year, and people feel like they can be open and can express difficulties with mental illness just the same way that they would be able to talk about a broken arm or something that's been more traditionally felt as an injury, right? We're starting to become more aware of how mental health impacts people's overall health, their ability to perform at work, at school, in order to interact with their friends and family, and be in society as feeling good about themselves and feeling that they're productive and worthwhile citizens. If you have any experience with mental health, and I do, both in my family and personally, you know that it's very difficult to do anything if you are not healthy, and having mental health issues is every bit as important. Managing them is every bit as important as managing physicals. If somebody had a heart attack, you wouldn't tell them just to go outside and have a jog or shake it off or just try to smile a bit more and then send them right back to work, right? I mean, most people, if somebody has a heart attack, they understand, oh wow, something serious has happened. their heart is, deeply damaged, and they're going to need medical care and possibly surgery and time to recover. And they got to be healthy before they come back to work and are expected to sort of jump back into society. Whereas for a lot of years, people who had maybe mental illnesses and may have been suffering so badly that they were, thinking about suicide and things like that, it's still a life or death situation, but it's the sort of thing that wouldn't get as much discussion and sympathy. And sympathy might not even be the right word. I think more respect, that this is a legitimate health concern. And now, obviously, not every issue with mental health is as severe as a life or death, someone considering suicide. There's all sorts of different gradients, just like there are physical injuries, right? From a scratch on your finger to a terminal cancer diagnosis or something like that. There's a huge scale of the way you can be injured in a physical manner. There's a huge scale in the way that you can have issues with mental health as well. But they can both be life or death, and they all need to be managed, because a person who is at the end of their rope and is really, really suffering from a mental health condition is no better able to contribute to society than someone who's just had surgery for a heart attack. And I think that this is getting better and better and better as we move forward. I think mental health is finally starting to be given enough attention in the media, enough respect with regard to rights, government, and just a general perspective of people. There are definitely people that are resistant to those ideas. And when I was young, I'm 43. When I was young and growing up, we didn't talk about mental health a lot. People said, "Oh, I'm depressed," but they really just meant I'm sad for the day. People who were genuinely depressed and really, really needed treatment for mental health illnesses, it wasn't talked about. Oftentimes people wouldn't tell their doctors, they wouldn't tell their family, they just kind of suffer in silence, because the idea of any mental illness, not just depression, but any sort of mental health problem, was treated as a personal weakness and something that you can just kind of get over, and something that if you smile enough, or if you run enough, or if you just try to be happier, or if you just try to focus, or whatever lame idea society had about how to make that better, people just didn't understand it, and they didn't understand that treating it wasn't just as simple as deciding to be better. Just like you would never tell somebody with a heart attack, well, just try to breathe a little deeper or something, and then get on your feet. So it just wasn't given the same respect and framework for understanding that physical injuries were. And I think we're getting a lot closer now. There's still a lot of nations, groups of people, politics, employers, blah, 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 where this is very slow to change, and they've been very resistant to change. But I think that in general, it's getting better. I can tell from my own situation and my own family history that it's getting better already. Even within the last 25 years, even within the last 10 years, significant strides have been made. And I think that's going to continue in the future. So there's an example of something that's kind of broad when I just discussed mental health in general, but that's something that 50 to 100 years ago, you would never, ever go to your boss and say, "Listen, I have mental health issues. I'm going to need some time off to get treatment, and hopefully you'll support me through this." That would never happen 50 years ago. The boss wouldn't even know what to say. Most of them probably would have thought, and these are just regular people, like you and me. It just wasn't part of the cultural understanding that we have today, or that we're gaining today. The boss would have gone, like, "What does that mean? You're sad, so you don't want to work for today? That's ridiculous. You're fired, or suck it up and go back to work." Like, that's the approach that would have happened 50 to 100 years ago. And you never would have brought it up anyway, because you knew that's what the approach was going to be. So that's something that's changed significantly, that's related to healthcare as we move forward. So as long as you keep yourself sort of on that track of thinking, you can get maybe a bit more specific about some specific condition or event or viewpoint or something that's changed significantly in the last 50 with regard to health, and how we're changing the social perception of healthcare and a healthy individual and something like that. So that's the feedback that I have from that assignment. It's probably more detailed than you needed, but But there were some people that I think are going to resubmit that one, so that should give you plenty of ammo to tighten up some of your points. What I've seen so far on the 7.2 assignment, they've been done extremely well. So I think that one's really straightforward. Some people picked a couple points and made 5 good arguments or brought in 5 strong pieces of evidence that demonstrated their ability to understand the future of homes and housings, and also relate back to what we saw with Renaissance thinking and trying to connect people to encourage, but not enforce, but encourage connection and interactivity and building spaces that are conducive to that. I did have some people who were trying to maybe pushing it a little bit toward the we're going to force people to be together. That's probably not a good idea. But at least encouraging it with the way that we build buildings and making it easy for people to connect and interact in a positive manner. People had lots of great ideas about that. So that assignment I don't think there's any issues with. I think people have been answering it and demonstrating their learning exactly as expected them to. And then the final assignment is mostly reflective. It's not really a right or wrong, but I do want you to kind of back up your points with logic and reason, and just demonstrate to me some of the things that you've learned in the class that maybe stuck out a bit more than other things. So it's partially for me to just give you one last opportunity to demonstrate your learning. It's also an opportunity for me, if I ever teach this class again, to know, maybe where I should put a little bit more emphasis, where I should put a little less emphasis on the course. I don't know if I'll be teaching it again. I have enjoyed teaching it and working with you this quarter, but I'm not traditionally a history teacher. But there are definitely a lot of things that I do differently, and this gives you an opportunity to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Let me know what stood out for you and what you're going to take forward from this class, and also it gives me the opportunity to kind of determine where more or less emphasis should be the next time. That's all I got. It's 1:58. As usual, I talked for longer than I thought I would, but I want you to all to know that I really appreciate your efforts. I really appreciate reading your assignments and hearing your points of view and hearing how you're learning and taking things forward. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck finishing this course up, as well as the rest of your quarterly classes. I'm just going back to the chat messages here, which I probably didn't do enough, but I think I handled that about George. Depressive disorder was not acknowledged for a long time. No, George, you're certainly right, and that's well within my lifetime as well. It was recognized by doctors and psychiatrists and in the medical profession. It was certainly somewhat understood and recognized and realized, and there were treatments and whatnot. But as far as sort of general society went, people just didn't talk about it. They knew it existed, they underestimated the importance of it. And it just didn't generate the amount of discussion and respect, I think, that it's starting to now. And I think that's a good thing. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but I believe somebody to be truly healthy has to be healthy, in mind, body, spirit, and relationships. All right, well, I got another session starting right away, so I'll let you go, but I'll sign off by saying, as always, if there's any questions about any of the learning materials or assignments, if you need a little help with something, let me know. Please do your best to get whatever is remaining in, and best of luck to you. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Amelia. It's been wonderful working with you.